Welcome to the Blogger Genius Podcast, brought to you by MiloTree. Here's your host, Jillian Leslie.
Hello, friends. It's me, Jillian, founder of Catch My Party and MiloTree, and really business translator. I take what is working today in online business and blogging and break it down so that you can take these tactics and strategies and tips into your own business. Before I get started, I wanted to announce that I have just started a new Facebook group called the Blogger Genius Share and Grow Group. If you head to Facebook and type in Blogger Genius, it will pop up, and please join it. And what I want to do with this group is create a place where we can all grow our businesses together. It's a really interactive group where we all share links to blog posts, social media posts. We get to share what's working, what's not working, and really be there for each other. Please come join me in the Blogger Genius Share and Grow group, and let's help raise each other up. For today's episode, I have my friend Jennifer Froese back on the show. This is her second appearance, and she's really the brains behind Smart Creative Social, and she is a Pinterest expert. I know a lot of you are struggling with Pinterest today and don't know which way to turn. I think this interview is going to be very enlightening. What we talk about is, one, you need a very clear idea of what you're trying to achieve on the platform. And two, you need a strategy to figure out what is working and what isn't. And that means a lot of testing and a lot of digging into your analytics so that you can validate how things are working for you. We also talk a lot about how there are Pinterest gurus out there telling you what to do, and people are trying these strategies without doing some of the hard thinking. I know you're going to get a lot of clarity from this episode. So without further delay, here is my interview with Jennifer Froese. Jennifer, welcome back to the show.
I am really glad to be here again.
And I just have to say, I find you to be so inspiring, and I'm very happy to call you my friend.
Thank you. Same here. I mean, it's always great to have friends that are doing amazing things in business. And I see what you're doing in your Facebook group and all the discussions you're having and how you're trying to support everyone. And that's just, we need more of that in our industry.
I completely agree. And I feel like we do coaching, and I just did my coaching call today, and we were talking about making money in Q4. And the thing that I was saying is, how can you be there for people in today's world with this idea that we're all kind of separated, we're all a little freaked out, everything is, kind of thrown up in the air, and especially at a time when we're starved for connection. How can you connect and sell, but really connect first? Because I feel like that's what I'm starving for, what I think other people are starving for, and we're all just kind of spun. And how do you help others ground themselves? That's my kind of thesis for today.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I had a discussion with an organization. Normally I speak at their trade show every year, and they're doing it virtually next year. And so I was talking with one of their coordinators yesterday about topics that we could discuss. And so we were talking about, on Pinterest, one of the things that I know we're going to talk a lot about Pinterest, but one of the things that I see people failing at is they're looking at everything as a transaction. And I think this year, with everything that's changed, we really have to start looking at things as a relationship. That when somebody's coming from Pinterest to your site, it's not because, well, they clicked on my landing page and now they didn't convert, or they clicked on my product and they didn't buy. It's not about the transaction. It's more about how do we create a relationship and a connection with them, because everyone's really virtual right now. And so how do we do that? And that's, I think, something that's going to really differentiate everyone is as you're sending traffic from Pinterest to your site, thinking about it more as a relationship and connection, and getting them essentially into your funnel and using your funnel for relationship and connection, instead of, oh, they're going to come from Pinterest and they're going to go buy, $100 worth of glue. Like that, they're not doing that.
No, and I was saying that we like to think of our content as one to many. I write a blog post, I put a pin up on Pinterest, and then hundreds of people, let's say, click on that pin and come to my site. And instead, to think of it as one to one. And I know then people go, how do I scale one to one? And I go, you know what? Worry about that when it becomes a problem. Because really, thinking about every person who's coming to your site as somebody to connect with. And as you say, and I completely agree, get them on your list, find a way to connect with them so that they can see that you're there really to help them. I mean, what better time to do that, to really be thinking about, like, I see you, random person who's come to my site off of Pinterest. I see you and I want to help you.
Yeah, I think, one of the things I say in my program a lot is that people are coming to Pinterest to solve their problems. Now, we don't have to make problems mean a negative thing, right? It doesn't need to have a negative connotation. Their problem might be, I'm planning my wedding, right? And so, but they're coming to solve their problems, and your thing that you offer, whether that's a blog post, your content, whether that's a product, a course, a digital product, that's a solution. So you are helping people solve their problems. And when you look at it that way, you're like, okay, I'm not going to help everyone solve this problem, right? Everyone might not have this problem. And everyone who has this problem isn't necessarily going to want my solution, right? Because there's a lot of ways to solve a problem. And so when you start looking at it in that way, you can get a little bit more scaled down. Like you said, I had this client one time, I actually flew to their corporate offices and was doing a social media training. This is back when I used to be a social media manager. And we did like a whole week of trainings and it was great. But the VP of the company comes in and they had like 4 or 5 different brands that we were doing this for. And I said, who is your target audience for this one brand? And he's like, all women from ages 0 to 99. And I was like, no, you have to be more clear, because you can't make it one size fits all for everyone. It becomes so diluted. And so the more that you can make it really touch that subgroup of people that this is really, really for, that your special touch or angle on that thing hits those people the best, the better it's going to be successful, the more successful it's going to be. And now I feel like we're talking really, really abstract. So, but, I think that's where it gives you more success, is when you are not trying to be so broad and be the every solution for every person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like this idea of really niching down and knowing your niche, I've found very few people who are too niched. And I have found many people who are too broad. So if you're sitting here saying, yeah, but if I niche down, I'm going to lose my audience, I'd really question that. Now, the internet is a very big place. So chances are there's room for you. If in fact there's nobody in your niche, okay, you can get broader. But I would argue that if you're thinking about your niche, chances are you are too broad rather than too narrow. If I want, it's about knowing exactly who that person is who is struggling. Like, what do they look like? Where do they live? How many kids do they have? What's their career? Like, that's how granular you ultimately want to get when you think about your solution.
Yeah, I've had a lot of challenges with that whole idea of an avatar, like an ideal avatar, and her name is Linda and she lives on Sycamore Street. And I started to be like, what? I don't know who Linda is and I can't write for Linda. Like, so I understand the struggle and like trying to define it to that point. And so if you are struggling with that, you can then make yourself the avatar, right? Model it on yourself. Or a book that was really helpful for me in trying to come up with products was The Pumpkin Plan. And I can't remember his name. It's the same guy who wrote Profit First. But The Pumpkin Plan, anybody who's like, I'm thinking about coming up with a product and I think I'm going to do this. And I'm like, whoa, that product sounds nuts. What'd you base that on? I'll be like, go read The Pumpkin Plan. And that will help you figure out what thing you can offer your people that no one else is doing. And it's a really simple read. I think everyone in business should read that, among many other business books. But
I'm going to get that because I've never even heard of it. Okay.
Yeah, and the premise is about, like, those farmers that grow the prize winning pumpkins. They don't grow 80 pumpkins into the prize winning pumpkin. They identify the 1 or 2 pumpkins that are going to be the best, and then they put all their effort behind that. And so it's kind of that's the premise of the pumpkin plan. But yeah, I think a lot of times, like, we can get really in the weeds trying to be all things to everyone. And then, I do these Pinterest account audits. We do them within my program, but I also offer them as a service. And so I'll get into someone's Pinterest account and I'm like, whoa, you're all over the place. And you can't tell what you're about when you have too many things. And having multiple websites myself, this is very, very clear on Instagram, which we're not really talking about, but this is a good example. I have a DIY site called Smart Fun DIY, and we have an Instagram account for that. And I'm over here making a little Mexican food recipe, and then I got a little, painted pumpkins, and I'm going to Disneyland, and it's like all over the place, right? It's lifestyle, quote lifestyle. And I have had a hard time growing followers on that. And in fact, in the last couple of years, I think I've lost like 4,000 followers, right? Because like the growth is the loss is outpacing the growth. And I have another Instagram account called Best Craft Rooms that we just hit 91,000 followers organically in 2 years. And I mean, there were 6 months I didn't even post on that. And the difference that I think happens there is that people come to Smart Fun DIY and they see all that content and they're like, I don't know what this is about. My brain hurts. And then they just check out. They come to Best Craft Rooms and it's all craft rooms and it's very clear. It's only craft rooms. And they're like, either they're like, oh my God, I love craft rooms, I got to follow this. Or like, this isn't for me. And they check out, which is great, right? Because then you're only getting the people who are really, really like that thing in to follow you. But it comes back to what's the easiest for them to understand.
Totally.
And so when you're trying to be really broad, not only can they not understand it, but they don't have any connection point to you. Right? It's like people aren't like super passionate. Well, I guess there are a few, but people aren't super passionate about Walmart, but there are people who are super passionate about, Williams Sonoma or Crate and Barrel or Anthropology, because those are like more specialized stores. And they're like, really, they either love it or they hate it. And so it's kind of that same thing of like, when you are very focused, it's easy for people to understand and it's easy for people to get passionate about it.
Totally. Catch my party. Guess what? We post beautiful party photos, and we have 160 something followers on Instagram because it's very easy to translate what our page is about. And we're not going to have photos of Disneyland on that unless, no, we will if there's a Disneyland party, but we're not just going to kind of have like gardening tips. I mean, it doesn't make sense. So we've been very niche and it's been very successful for us. Okay, so let's dig in because we were initially going to talk about what is happening on Pinterest right now in this weird time. So what are you seeing?
So one thing I'm seeing, and this is just a pet peeve of mine, is people coming in Facebook groups. There was actually a thread today where I was responding to someone and they're like, my traffic fell off a cliff. The algorithm must have changed. And I'm like, okay. One thing I would say is go watch the movie The Social Dilemma and try to remember in your brain that it is biased. Like, it is biased to make you scared of social media. But the one thing I would love for people to take away from that is to know that an algorithm is a set of rules, a set of parameters that they put into the computer, okay? They put in the computer and then the AI, right, artificial intelligence, tries to execute and learn based on those parameters. Sometimes it goes awry, right? Because we were like, all of a sudden everybody's account was marked as suspended. Okay, well that's because like the AI went awry. Okay, so then they went in and adjusted it. So to say like the algorithm changed, it's all constantly changing. The inputs are changing, and then the way that the machine is interpreting them is changing because it's learning all the time. And so the change is constant. And the way to stay up with that is to be in your analytics and to be looking at, I call these signals. So in my program, I have an acronym called the SMART method for how to create a Pinterest strategy. And the first one is S, and it stands for signals. Signals are all these inputs, right? Your data from your analytics. What is Pinterest talking about on the engineering blog? Oh, in the news, I saw that Pinterest had an IPO. What could that possibly mean? And so all of that stuff is input for your strategy. So your data is just another signal. If you're not looking at that and in there like making micro adjustments, what happens is that as the algorithm is changing, the AI is learning, and they're making adjustments and refining that to get the result that Pinterest wants. Those changes add up almost to like a critical mass. It's like, have you ever been to a water park and they have that big bucket thing and it fills with water slowly, and then at some point it gets so full and it dumps on all the kids? It's like that. So you're like, I'm trucking along, everything's going great, right? You're standing under the water bucket and you're dry, right? So you're like, Pinterest is awesome. And then all of a sudden it dumps on you and you're like, my traffic fell off a cliff. It's just because the number of changes reached a critical mass and you weren't changing enough with it, that now you've got the water dumped on you, or your traffic fell off a cliff.
So let's get specific. What analytics are you looking at? What are you looking for?
So I would be looking at all kinds of things. One thing I would look at is impressions. People write off impressions as like, that's a vanity metric. Well, really, if it was, then why is Pinterest spending time collecting that information? So impressions just tells you how many potential people saw your content on Pinterest in the last 30 days, or whatever time parameter you set. Saw any content that you've posted at all. And then you can refine it down to like, I just want to know the impressions for my domain content, or I just want to know the impressions for my Etsy content. And you can get more granular that way. I would look at like overall, how many people are potentially seeing my content on my domain, how many, from my YouTube channel, how many. I would be looking at those numbers. What does that tell us? That tells us, is Pinterest understanding what my content is and showing it to the people who are interested in the same content, right? So then if my impressions were doing really good, but then now they're not, why did that go down? Is there a correlation with my traffic also going down? Well, no. Okay, well, if I dig into it and go, well, my impressions were really high overall, and then they dropped, but my impressions on just my own content are kind of the same. Oh, well, probably something that I pinned from somebody else did really well, and then now it kind of went down. So you can dig in more and get information from that. If the impressions are really high, but the clicks are really low, because you're like, okay, Pinterest, that means Pinterest is showing my stuff to a lot of people, but people aren't clicking on it. So either Pinterest didn't nail, who it's for. Like maybe it was how to make a gravel patio, and they're showing it to people that are looking for, driveways, grass ideas or something, right? Like Pinterest really didn't nail it. So it's showing it to the wrong people. So they're like, I'm not clicking on that. Or it's showing it to the right people, but everything else in the feed, or there's something else in the feed that's more compelling and more communicates what people want. So that's attracting the click, right? Or if my impressions are high, my clicks are low, but my saves are high, there's something in there that's telling people, save this, but don't go take action to click. Something in it is making them not want to take action. So the numbers are for you then to go and do some analysis of like, what does that possibly mean? So I would be looking at impressions, I'd be looking at clicks, I'd be looking at saves, but I wouldn't be concentrating. What I see people ask a lot is like, how many pins per day should I do? What's a good range of impressions for my industry? How many saves should I expect on a blog that's 2 years old? That is irrelevant. The only numbers you need to worry about are yours. So like, for example, I have a funnel, and one part of my funnel converts at 22%, and the industry average is 2%. So if I said, well, great, I'm doing 11 times the industry average, I can just phone it in and I'm done. No, I'm like, okay, how can we get it to 25%? How can we get it to 30%, right? You compare with your own numbers. The industry average just tells you what a C average is, right? I have the same belief about best practices. If you want to be average, great. I guess spend your time doing that. I don't want to be a C student. I want to be an A+ student. So I want to be an outlier. I want to be like doing amazing, not in the middle of the bell curve. So I don't care what anyone else is doing. I care what I did last month and last year, and how am I improving over that year over year, month over month.
I wanted to take a quick break to talk about the power of MiloTree at growing Pinterest followers. Remember, Pinterest followers matter. They signal to the algorithm that your account is important. Plus, with story pins leading to your page on Pinterest, you'll see your follower count right there. We have been using the MiloTree Pinterest pop-up on Catch My Party, and we've grown our Pinterest followers to 1.4 million. If you are looking for an easy way to grow Pinterest followers, real followers, these are ones who will interact with your content on Pinterest, please pause the episode, head to MiloTree.com, sign up for your 30-day free trial, install the pop-up on your blog, and watch your Pinterest followers grow. And now, back to the show. So now, what would you say makes for a good pin? Because I know people have all these different ideas, but if you were to go, you know what, I think a great pin has these 3 things or 5 things, what would you say the ingredients are?
So, it really depends on the keywords. And I see a lot of people selling templates saying these are the proven templates that work. If I will tell you that a pin that is for industrial conveyor belts is going to look different than a pin for chicken tacos, is going to look different than a pin for how to make a Pac-Man costume. They have to, because the environment they are functioning in, the environment they live in, the search results for that keyword is drastically different depending on what the keyword is, even within industries. If I wanted to do a search for chicken taco recipes and then I did a search for keto chicken tacos, it's going to look very, very different. The keto chicken taco search feed and the regular chicken taco search feed. And so you've got to look at what is the environment that pin is going to live in and how do I make it stand out? And so somebody told me the other day they thought I was nuts because one of the things that I offer in my program is 1,000 pin templates. And they're like, why do you need 1,000? I said, well, first of all, it makes it easy to create a lot of pins. But second, there are so many different feeds that these pins will be competing in. And so what works in one doesn't necessarily make that pin stand out in another feed. So I would say one, do the keyword search, look at the colors. What are the dominant colors? What are ways that you can stand out or play within that environment and be the pin that, imagine only 20% of people are looking at Pinterest on desktop. So you've got this whole screen of pins. How do you get people to look at your pin that's on the right-hand side of the screen when their face is on the left, their eyes are on the left-hand side of the screen? Imagine they're on their digital device. They've got 2 pins side by side as they're scrolling, maybe more if they're on an iPad. How do you stand out and get them to click on your pin knowing that's the environment it's going to live in? So if I had a macaroni and cheese recipe pin, am I going to make my macaroni and cheese look yellow like everybody else's macaroni and cheese? What am I going to do to differentiate it? Okay, well, what I've seen a lot of food bloggers do is put a piece of parsley in the photo. Okay, so now they all have parsley. So what else are you going to do to make it look different in that feed so that the eye goes to that? Not only that, but the text overlay that you choose is important, because what do all the other fonts look like? If all the other fonts look like handwriting and scripty and they've got curved text, you're going to make yours look just like those? Why? Because a food blogger said that worked for food blogging? Maybe. Like, test it, try something different, try that look, try something different. The other thing is call outs, right? What's special about this? If I'm going to look for a mac and cheese recipe on Pinterest, I'm going to see 80 bajillion mac and cheese recipes. What makes yours different? Is it ready in 3 seconds? Is it, and I know that sounds nuts, but like, that's the kind of stuff you need to tell people. It's 3 ingredients. It costs $1.22 a serving. I can make it in the Instant Pot. Like, what? It's gluten-free. It's dairy-free. What makes it super special, amazing? It's grandma's recipe. I need to know that on the pin, because I know I'm looking for mac and cheese recipes. I don't need you to tell me that this is just another mac and cheese recipe like everyone else's. I need to know what makes this the most special mac and cheese recipe. So those things, like as far as visually on the pin, that's a place I see people make mistakes. And then when it comes to the keywords, because visually that's talking to people, right? Pinterest has the image.
And a call to action on the pin?
Right. Like, even if it's not necessarily a call to action, something that tells me what makes this special, right? So you can have a call to action and it says mac and cheese recipe and it says click here for recipe. Is that compelling? No, right? Like, we all know to click here for recipe. So it's got to be what's compelling to get me to click on this in the sea of other yellow mac and cheese recipes I'm looking at. How is this one going to call out to me in the feed. And then we have to remember that we also have to communicate with Pinterest. So you need keywords in the pin name, you need keywords in the description, maybe some keywords in that text overlay, and not just keyword stuffing and not just phoning it in. Like I see people, they leave the pin description to the end and they're like, oh, this is grandma's mac and cheese recipe. Make this yummy mac and cheese recipe tonight for dinner. Your family will love it. My family likes it. I need more keywords than that, right? Like Pinterest is like, okay, we get that this is mac and cheese. Awesome.
And grandma, and we figured out grandma's somehow involved.
Right. And there's maybe something else in there, but like, if you're not doing the keyword research and then optimizing for that, it's not going to have a long life. And so the keywords or the information you're giving to Pinterest. So if you want people to find this and you only say that it's mac and cheese and you don't put in that it's dairy free and gluten free and it's 3 ingredients and it takes 2 minutes and an Instant Pot, you don't put all that stuff, it's only going to show it for mac and cheese. And then what happens is if you didn't do the optimization on the image to make it stand out to people, Pinterest is going to show it to a bunch of people who are searching for mac and cheese, who have searched for mac and cheese and are interested in it. And those people are going to be like, and they're not going to respond. And Pinterest is going to go, oh, maybe we didn't nail it with that one. Like maybe it's not really about mac and cheese, or maybe it's just not what people want. So we're going to show it to less people and less people and less people and less people. And so then you say, okay, well, I'm going to make more fresh pins. I'm going to make more mac and cheese pins that just say mac and cheese. And then you're like, I pinned this and it's been there for 2 weeks and it has 0 impressions and 0 clicks. Well, I wonder why. Because Pinterest is like, yeah, this person's this link and this thing is not about mac and cheese. So we're not going to show it to those people.
And I would say that every single opportunity you get to talk to the algorithm, because you are feeding the algorithm. Like Pinterest wants you to succeed. It makes the platform better if you're successful. So you're weirdly aligned with Pinterest. They're not the enemy. They're actually your friend. So for example, the name of your pin, the file name, needs keywords in it, because you better believe Pinterest is reading that file name of that photo. And any place, the board description, the pin description, the title, the like hashtags, absolutely coming at the mac and cheese from a whole host of angles. So maybe it is grandma's mac and cheese. What kinds of cheese? How quickly can you make this? How do what, rather than kind of these, like, I would argue if you were to be, either creating pins or actually optimizing pins, I'd focus on optimizing the pins that you're creating. So maybe you can only in this amount of time create 2 pins, but you can optimize the hell out of them. I would argue that's better than creating 5 mediocre pins and kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall.
Yes, 100%. Like I'll see posts in groups like, and people will say like, oh, I'm making 50 fresh pins a week and blasting Pinterest. And it's like, Pinterest wants a good user experience, right? And so if you're just blasting it with like lackluster, lame stuff, it's going to just show your stuff to fewer and fewer people. Whereas if you spent that time really optimizing the pin, really optimizing your images, really doing the keyword research, then you will get more traction from your pin. And so when I say that to people, they'll be like, well, I did that with a pin and it didn't work. Okay, well, you got to do it for a while, because it's like you just went backwards telling everybody that, like, it'd be like if you, I don't know, I don't have a good analogy for this, but normally I have good analogies. But it would be like if you just ate burgers and pizza for 3 weeks and you gained a bunch of weight and now you're like, well, I ate a piece of broccoli today, I didn't lose weight. Well, it doesn't work that way, right? So like, it's like you've got to like undo what you did and then go back to like improving. And so, that stuff takes a little bit of time to recover from. But yeah, I think people misunderstand fresh pins for sure. And then they don't spend the time on the optimization. And again, then they take that and they discern from that, oh, she means less is more. No, that's not the thing. It doesn't mean you need to pin less now. It doesn't mean you need to pin less frequently. It doesn't mean you need to turn off Smart Loop. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means you need to spend the time optimizing it to function in the environment it's going to live in so you can get the most success possible. Because if we go back to people have a problem and I have a solution, how are you going to best help them solve their problem? Their problem is, I need a really good mac and cheese recipe that's going to blow the socks off of the people at the potluck on Friday. And so that's the one I'm looking for. And so if yours says easy potluck recipe or potluck favorite and no one else's does, I'll be like, that's the one I'm clicking.
And
right?
think about it this way. There is a competitive advantage doing that extra bit of work. Because you can assume most people are throwing pins up like throwing spaghetti at the wall. So if your pin is one that feeds the algorithm a little bit better, where you focused on keywords and you've done the keyword research before and you've looked at pins in your space, like assume 99% of content creators are not doing this. So if you are the one content creator who's spending that even if you can't make as many pins, but you are taking the pins that you have and you are upping the game on those pins, you will be rewarded. Now, will you be rewarded on every pin? No. But is your chance of success higher by putting the intention behind it? Absolutely. I say too that this idea, everybody freaked out when Pinterest said, we want fresh content. And I said, again, look at that as a competitive advantage. If you're the one who's willing to make fresh pins versus somebody who's just repinning their old content, you're at an advantage. So you're the one making fresh pins and you're the one optimizing those pins. Trust me, that is a recipe for success.
Yeah, I'd like to say, like, people in my program hear me say this all the time, that every pin is an experiment. So what a gift fresh pins is, because every time that you make a new pin, you've gone through the process to optimize it, you push it out into the environment, and then you get to observe what it does. And then you make it and you go, oh, okay, that was interesting. That performed this way. Oh, that bombed. Okay, why did that happen? You analyze, then you go back and refine, and you do another test, and then you do another test, and then you do another test. And guess what? Pinterest doesn't see that as spam. Like, oh my gosh, what a gift that is. If you did that on YouTube where you took the same video and edited it over and over and over and put it out on YouTube, YouTube would be like, your channel is weird. Like, we're not going to show that to anyone, yes. Right? So, and the same with Instagram. You put the same thing up over and over and over, just trying different captions and stuff. Instagram would be like, this is terrible. So what a gift that is to us, that we can continue to refine and test and refine and test and refine and test on Pinterest to make our content better. And not just like, I see people who are so fixated on new content. In the last year, okay, you guys, the last year, I have done, is it 3 or 2? Either 2 or 3 blog posts on smartphone DIY in a year, okay? Traffic is up 43% from Pinterest over last year. So is revenue, like even with COVID, like revenue's up and it's great.
And are you creating fresh pins?
I'm creating fresh pins, but one of the things that I'm doing is going into content that's doing well on Pinterest, because again, people are like, this year's crazy. Stuff that did great last year is not doing great, and then weird stuff's doing good. And I was like, I'm experiencing the same thing. I have a series of posts that over the last 4 years have been my bread and butter money makers. And when COVID hit, those posts bombed. Those posts are about money gifts, and nobody's wanting to give money gifts because they're like, yeah, I lost my job. But what are they wanting? They're wanting all this other weird stuff that's on my site that's like terrible, that all of a sudden is getting traffic from Pinterest. And so I'm like, I could sit there and fight it and be like, well, my money gifts is my thing. And I could fight it, or I can just say, okay, what am I going to do to make that content better? Because if we go back to like how I was talking about signals, Pinterest wants a great user experience. If people have a good user experience there, they're going to come back when they're like, oh, I have this thing I want to look for. I'm going to go to Pinterest, right? Pinterest doesn't want them to be like, I'm going to go to Google, right? Because my experience on Pinterest was terrible, so I'm going to go to Google now. No, they want a good experience. So if you are on Pinterest and you have these pins and you're like, okay, well, this is a post I'm sending people to, improve the post. Make it answer all those things that it wasn't answering before. Because like, I guarantee you, your post you wrote 2 years ago is terrible if you read it today, because you're a better writer. You are a better content creator, right? I go back, I look at these posts I wrote in 2016 and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I can't even believe that I put that on there. but then go back and edit it and update it and do that analysis. Like I have a post, it was a sponsored post for a gum brand, and it was about using nail polish to paint on metal. And so none of that makes sense at all. And so on one of the pins, it took off this year. One of the pins, somebody said, this is just an ad for gum. And I was like, oh my gosh. Well, it's a sponsored post from so long ago. I was like, we can take some of that off. They don't even sell that gum anymore. So we'll take all that off. That's not helping anybody. And then I was like, what is it that they're looking for? Why are they looking for this with nail polish? Oh, because they're at home and they have nail polish and they want to make crafts and they don't want to spend money and they can't even get to the craft store and blah, blah, blah. So I was like, okay, what can I do in this post? Like really thinking about what is the intention of that person visiting it. I'm like, what can I do to this post to make it better? Because once I took all the sponsored stuff out, now it was like 3 sentences, right? So I was like, how do I make it better and answer what people want? And so I literally just went through and optimized that. And then I was like, and what result do I want from this? I was like, I directed people to go to my, to follow me. Yeah. Follow me on Pinterest was the call to action that I had. And then, cause I was like, those people are just going to want more craft ideas. And I don't have a lot of nail polish crafts and it's not something I really want to do. So the next best thing is to keep them connected to me on Pinterest so I can give them more ideas. And then I gave them some links to some other content on my site that I thought if they're looking for that. And in my research on Pinterest, I also realized when they're looking for nail polish, they're looking for kids. Some of them are looking for kids crafts. So I directed them to some other kids crafts and some other low cost crafts like rock painting that could be related to like the reason that they're coming over for the nail polish crafts is they're trying to find cheap crafts they can do at home. So then I linked to other stuff on my site. So I was like, the best I'm going to get out of that is like a page view, so I can make some money from the traffic. Then I will get them to click over to some other content I have. I'll get them to follow me on Pinterest. And then I also put some affiliate links in there for some of the more specialized things that I was talking about within the post. And I was like, okay, I've optimized that on my site. So I could have just said, great, I'm just going to keep making fresh pins and keep sending people to that piece of content. But there was a disconnect, right? I send people over and then I wasn't having a real call to action. I wasn't serving those people. I wasn't solving their problem. So I went and improved the content. And now I made fresh pins that are optimized, that are sending people there. So there's a better experience all the way around.
And Google is seeing this as well.
Right.
So therefore, you're going to get that halo effect of Google. And you better believe Google's also watching your Pinterest. Again, it's not like the Google gods. It's all part of the algorithm. But Google's paying attention to Pinterest and seeing this pin doing well, this content doing well. Google sees you updated the content. Chances are you've updated the date. And they see this as fresh content. So it's like a win-win all around and I like this because you're thinking holistically rather than, oh, I just spam Pinterest with more pins to this mediocre content.
Right. And, I say this all the time. I'm like, typically what's good for Google is good for Pinterest, and what's good for Pinterest is good for Google, because they are both search engines that at the end of the day want people to have a stellar experience going to any of the search results they generate. So the more you can deliver a stellar experience, the better your content's going to perform. And even content where like I had this post from 2014 that was like doing great and I was number 1 on Google and it was like massively great on Pinterest. And then another blogger came along and like chased after the same keywords. I really dislike when people do that, but it really rubbed me the wrong way. I was really mad about it. And so then I went back to my content and I was like, oh, my post is better. And I read it and then I read her post and I was like, oh, my post sucks. Like this post is old and bad and out of date, and I updated it. Well, that was 2 years ago. So now I was looking at it the other week because I was like, my numbers are down on Google Analytics for that. And I was like, I got to update this post. Like, even though I made it so much better in 2018, I look back at it now in 2020. I'm like, yeah, that post is terrible. I need to work on it. And so it's something that like, as you look in your analytics and you're like, okay, this post is doing well, this is getting traffic, don't just make more pins for it. Go to the content and say, how can I make this content better so that those people coming over have a better experience? But also, what result do I want to get from people coming to this content? It has to be more than a page view, right? Because we talked about people having relationships. And so get them on your list, get them to follow you on social, get them to join your Facebook group, something so that you can continue that conversation. So it's not just, I found this sangria recipe on Pinterest and I made it. I don't know who it's from. I found it on Pinterest. We don't want people doing that. We want them to be like, oh my gosh, I found the most amazing sangria recipe on Catch My Party. It's this rad site and I get emails from her every week and it's so great. Like, that's what we want.
Totally. I say, do not think of yourself as a content creator. Think of yourself as a content marketer. It doesn't mean that you're not wanting to create the best sangria recipe, but how is this growing your business? Ask yourself every single time, what do I want from this post? Have a goal, not just, I want that one page view. So it could be, I want you on my list. It could be, I want you to buy my product. It could be, I want you to follow me on social. It could be, I want you to click on these affiliate links. It could be, I want to drive you to 5 other pages. But you need to know that when you are creating that piece of content or updating that piece of content, because in 2016, we weren't thinking about this. We hadn't fully connected the dots. So now your job is to go back and go, oh, what is my number one goal? And by the way, I don't recommend throwing the kitchen sink at them and saying, do all of these things. Think about it in terms of one ask, but be very clear. And I call these like street signs, like, where you're saying, hey, if you like this, sign up for my list and you'll get more. Or, hey, if you like this, follow me on Pinterest or whatever it is, but let people know what you want them to do in the post. Like, be very clear. Don't beat around the bush. You got this. Like, we all want to kind of have somebody tell us what to do because life's busy. And, you just tell me I'm going to get, tell them what the value is. You're going to get more recipes from me. Hey, give me your email address. All right, I'll do that. I love it. I always say this on blogs where it says start here in the nav bar, because guess what I do? I start there because they told me to start there. So just be thinking about being very, very clear about what you want people to do. Now, wait, I want to talk to you about video pins. What is your thought on that? And can you get people to click? Can you get traffic from video pins, or is it more of brand awareness and that kind of thing?
So people are always trying to compare video pin performance to static pin performance, and it is legit an apples to oranges comparison. They are different. And Pinterest has said in so many words, like, don't ask me like, well, what word did they say this, Jennifer? Like, copy and paste it. I'm like, I don't have like a URL for that. Okay. And I mentioned this the other day. I was like, I don't have like, the red Pinterest phone that I can call up and be like, hey, Pinterest, what's the secret password stuff? Like, I don't have that. But in so many words, Pinterest has, with the creator program, with kind of how they're pushing video pins, they want to be more of a content consumption platform. So that's where video pins come in. A pinner, like a regular average user, is going to see a video pin and they're going to click on it because they're trained with static pins to click on it to go to the website. But when they click a video pin, it pauses. So they click it again and it plays, and they click it again and it pauses, and they click it again and it plays, and they're like, oh my God, I'm so frustrated. And so then they save it. And so that's why video pins have high impressions and high saves, is because people are interacting with them, they're watching them. Pinterest is pushing it to the top of the feed because they want to be a content consumption platform. And people are saving it because they don't know what else to do with it. They want to do the idea, but they don't know how to click on it. Pinterest keeps moving stuff around. Right now, when you click on the title, I believe, and I believe also the description, it will take you to the destination. However, on mobile, on some devices, if you click the title or the description doesn't do anything, you have to click these 3 dots and then it says visit site or something like that. So it's very difficult to get them from a video pin to your site. So you can get really creative. Like way back in the beginning, I actually gave a talk about Social Media Marketing World about this almost a year ago, about video pins. And I was like, you can put arrows telling them click down here or click the description, or you can do all those things. But then when they move it around, where are the places that you have to click? And on desktop, the description is next to the pin, like on the side, on the right-hand side. On mobile, it's underneath or below the pin. Now where you put your arrow, like, I don't know, you got 2 arrows, now they're confused. Like, so it's just very challenging. There are some things you can do, like maybe do some short links, maybe, there's tactics you can do, but it's really getting clear on like, what is it that I can expect as a result from a video pin? And so a lot of people will say, okay, well, it's just brand awareness. cool. If that's what you want to use it for, how are you going to measure that? If you're using it for clicks or for follows, it definitely makes it easy for people to follow. There's a big old follow button right there. You know, that like the actions people can take that are clear are save, follow, and watch. So you could use it to grow your followers. But, you know, I would experiment with having some really clear calls to action, and I would be very wary of gimmicks. One of the things that I found quite a while ago was on Canva, if you put a animated GIF into your pin or onto any graphic, you can download that now as a video. And it will play for however long the animated GIF plays, so 3 seconds or whatever. So you could like loop those together and make a longer video. Like there's a lot of things you can do. Again, at the end of the day, how are you best solving people's problem with your solution? How are you best telling them about your solution if you're just sticking an animated GIF on something and calling it a video? I don't know that that's the great solution. Can that be part of your videos? Can that be part of it? Yeah, that could be something you could do. But I think, you know, that kind of stuff of you're like, I'm just gonna take all my static pins and put an animated GIF and have it be a video. This is something I've actually seen shared. Does that actually give you results? No, it'll probably give you high impressions. Are you really communicating to people to click over to your site? Is it going to generate clicks? No, because you just stuck a little animated stars or something on it. So I think that kind of stuff, like getting caught up in the gimmicks of it, you know, go back to like, what result do I want from this? Do I think I can attain that from this? How will I measure success? How will I measure getting that result? And then measure that. Right? So like if you're like, I'm going to do video pins to get clicks. Okay, I don't know where you got that idea from. That's going to happen, but great, do it, experiment with it. How are you going to measure that? And what thresholds do you need to meet in order for you to say this is successful? And I'm going to continue doing that.
Now, would you argue that static pins give you more traffic, and if you had to prioritize, you'd be focusing a lot more on your static pins?
I wouldn't say that. So I would say like the impressions, the ratio of impressions to clicks and saves on a static pin, it's much closer together. There's a wider gap between impressions and saves and clicks on video pins. So comparing the two in that way, they just don't really work that way. And Pinterest on the engineering blog recently was talking about how they're improving their system and basically automating their system for creating a content mix. So before, what they would do is they would manually go in and say, okay, if we show 20 pins, 4 of them will be video and 16 will be, you know, static and 4 will be stories or whatever. And so they were manually adjusting that for different groups of people, and it wasn't working. This is basically what they say in the engineering blog. So they now have a system that's a little bit more responsive, where it can do that at scale automatically. So knowing that, right, they're putting the inputs into the program they're going to show some video pins, they're going to show some static pins, they're going to show some story pins. So if you know that, it would behoove you, if you want to get your stuff in front of people, to do some video pins, some static pins, and some story pins. Now, what are the ratios of that? Okay, well, should I do 20% this? And I can't tell you that, right? That's something you're going to have to figure out for yourself. What resources do you have? Do you have a full-time video editor that can make all these video pins for you? And then what does the ROI need to be for you to then say that was a worthwhile investment, right? So then you got to get really clear on that stuff. And what I see is that people aren't doing that. They're just like, well, you told me how to make a mix of stuff. So I made 800 video pins and I spent $4,000 on it. And I got, you know, I didn't make any money from that. And I'm like, okay, well, we need to start with like, first, what result do you want? Then how are we going to measure that? And what threshold, what threshold does it need to meet in order for you to continue that, or for you to change up how you're doing it? And so I would say, don't just say, I'm going to put everything all behind one thing, knowing that they have a content mix they're going to serve to people. If you have a mix of content, you have a better chance of being in that, being served. But now you have to say, what resources do I have, and what return on investment do I need for that? It may be that you just make 2 video pins a month, right? That might be just what you do, because that's what you have the capacity to do. And then you make those really optimized and be really clear, what result am I expecting from that? And then go look at the data and again, refine and test and refine and test.
Now let's talk story pins. What is your thought about, I know what you said is true. Pinterest, again, remember, they care about the user experience, and the longer they can keep you on the platform, the better. Therefore, if you're in there looking now at story pins, which live on Pinterest, they can be showing you more ads and make more money. And especially because their US audience, they're kind of maxed out in terms of their US audience. They make the most money from their US audience. Therefore, they've got to come up with new products to entice people to come back to the platform, to get kind of an entertainment value on the platform. So it makes perfect sense that they're starting to lean into tools and ways for people to create on the platform. Also, let's say I've read this, that if you are like Gen Z and you don't have a blog, but you want to make something, create stuff, kind of like you can do now on TikTok or Instagram or Snapchat, they want to have a way for you to create content on Pinterest. So what is your overall thought about story pins?
So I think, knowing that all of that about Pinterest, knowing that about the way people are consuming content on the platform, and then overlay that with like, what are your goals, right? So like if you're a blogger, like, yeah, I need to get people over to my site, right? I need people to my blog so they can look at ads, they can click affiliate links, they can buy my products, and give some sponsors some eyeballs. So and get on my list. So those are the things that we want to have happen if you're a blogger. So if you're going to do a story pin, how do you mesh, like at what points does what Pinterest want meet what you want? And so there are some tactics I've seen people do, like on story pins, you can click on the, I've seen people put the link to their blog post in the supply list. So the challenge with that, because I've done this on mobile, is I will try to copy that. First of all, it's a little challenging to copy. Can't always get it to work. But then when I copy it, it's copying the whole supply list with your URL. Where the heck do I paste that? Now I got to put it in notes. I got to delete all your supply list. That's a lot of dang work. So what can you do instead? So and I'm not going to tell you what to do instead, because that's not helping you think critically. Like what you got to learn is the process of solving your own problems. And so, because especially if I say it on here, now 40 people are going to do the same thing. And then now that's diluted.
Oh, wait, you have a secret you're not sharing?
Oh, I have tons of secrets I'm not sharing that I but the reason for that is that it's that whole thing of, you can teach someone to fish, you can give someone a fish, or you can teach them how to fish. And so the thing is saying, what are the challenges presented by story pins? How do I get the result that I want? And then going and interacting with story pins, and not just waiting for some expert out there to tell you, well, this is what you got to do, the secret sauce for story pins, because then all of a sudden that becomes what everybody does. Right. And so if you're just doing what everybody does, and you don't know how to do the next innovation. And it's really about learning how to creatively solve the challenge, to creatively get the result that you want. That's where innovation comes from. So wouldn't it be awesome if you got to invent this next new way of story pins, and then when everybody else is using that, you're like, yeah, okay, no problem, because I'm already on to the next way I'm going to get an ROI from that. Right. So maybe it's you don't put a supply list, you put just your link. Maybe it's you put something on the screen and you tell them to screenshot it. Like those are some ideas. Like there's so many lessons we can learn from TikTok and from Instagram stories and those things of challenges people have had there, that we can say, oh, we have similar challenges with story pins. We could do that there. And again, going back to how do I get the results I want, but also how do I best help that person solve their problem? If they're trying to make a recipe from a story pin and it's got a bunch of ingredients, like I'm not going to sit there and watch the story pin over and over and over. So can you help them by telling them to screenshot the ingredients? Maybe. Or could you better help them by giving them a URL that's easy for them to click over, and now they can go print out the recipe from a PDF or something? Like, how do you best solve them? So thinking of those things, and also how do you get your results? Instead of worrying about it being gimmicky of like, okay, well, she said if you don't put the supply list and you put your link there, it's easy for them to copy. Maybe, but does that work? And then how are you even going to measure that?
I like that. I think that all makes a lot of sense. Now, do you think Pinterest will ultimately give you a link in your story pins? I heard there were certain countries that were experimenting, that Pinterest was experimenting with a link in a story pin. What is your thought? So, and not that you have a crystal ball.
No, I've been in the story pin beta for 2 years, and they did have links in the very beginning. here's the thing. So, and I would answer that question with a question. What difference does it make? So are you just going to wait until story pins have a link and that's when you're going to work on them? And you're going to miss all the opportunity to learn things about it now? No, accept the environment that it is today. And how do you get the results you want and serve people the best in that environment?
I think that's great advice. I really do. Okay, so if you were to give one piece of advice for people, for creators trying to reach people during this weird time on Pinterest, and I know we've talked about kind of connecting one-on-one or that sense of intimacy. We've talked about like be where people are. Is there anything else you would add for connecting with people today? Like, what are you seeing, like where you go, God, that is working?
For lack of a better way to describe it, I'm going to call it keep your eyes on your own page.
Ooh, what do you mean?
So I see people coming into Facebook groups and they're sharing like, I did this amazing strategy and it got me, 800 bajillion impressions, right? Usually they say impressions instead of like clicks. And so then other people are like, oh my gosh, I got to try that. And it's a secret sauce and I got to do it. Or they'll go on YouTube and they'll watch like 45 tutorials and they'll be like, I'm going to try all these tactics. And they're just throwing stuff at the wall. Instead of going, okay, what do my numbers say? What performs well for me? When I do keyword research, what am I seeing? Right? Instead of going, I see so many people going to outside sources and just cobbling together like all this disparate stuff and just like, whatever is passing by, they're just grabbing it. And they're not clear on like why they're doing it. And they're so worried about like somebody out there has the secret. And I'm just like, just focus on your own business. If you want help, then find a resource and invest in that resource to help you and really use that resource. But just going to the Facebook groups and grabbing at, like I call it on the grab, grabbing at this tactic and that tactic and this thing. And oh, that person has a secret thing that worked for them. And now I got to follow it to the T. There's no like special secret dance that like unlocks the secret traffic door. Like there's no, like, if you follow these steps, that magicness is going to happen because there's so many factors that you are aware of and unaware of, right? So then focus on your own page, the factors that you are aware of, your content, your data, the optimization that you do on your pins, the graphics that you have, all that's within your control. How frequently you publish, what tools you use to publish. Focus on that, keep your eyes on your own page, and don't be so worried about grabbing all these things. And if you are like, I'm feeling lost, I need a guide, invest in someone, invest in a consultant, invest in someone's program, but invest. Don't just be trying to cobble together free stuff because you will forever be in the struggle of the school of hard knocks and you don't got time for that.
I love that. Okay, Jennifer, if people want to reach out to you to learn more, what is the best way for them to do it?
The best way is for them to go through my masterclass. So they can just go to SmartPin, so PIN for Pinterest, smartpin.pro/free, and they can get in right there. And I've got a whole training on that SMART method that I mentioned, how to make a Pinterest strategy. And that would be the best place. And that's the place to get to know me and what I have to offer. You can also find me at smartcreativesocial.com, Smart Creative Social on social media. But the place that I would say, if you're ready to do Pinterest stuff, go to the masterclass.
I love that. Well, I have to say, I always learn a ton from you. You are a breath of fresh air. And I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I always love being here. And thank you for the opportunity to share more Pinterest goodness.
I hope you guys learned a lot from this episode. My biggest takeaway is that there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution and that your business is different from everybody else's. So therefore, you've got to think really critically about what you're trying to accomplish. Then you've got to create a bunch of pins and test them. Look at your analytics to see how they're performing so that you can get better. And that it isn't a numbers game, meaning it isn't about putting out 1,000 pins because your hope is that one of them hits. It's really about being intentional when creating pins, when thinking about how to achieve what you want to achieve. So it's almost like my advice is slow down. Take the time to see what works for you. And please head to Facebook and join my Facebook group called the Blogger Genius Share and Grow Group. I think you'll really like it. I would love to have you as part of my community. If you search in Facebook for Blogger Genius, you'll see it show up, and please join. And I'll see you here again next week.